Okay, so we all know what King of the Hill is, right? Hank Hill, Bobby Hill, Peggy Hill, all those characters we all come know and love. Well, what if I told you that there was a lost episode of this show? Now you might be asking yourself, how can anything be scary about this show? Well, this story will tell you how that is possible. So, sit down, relax, and get your propane and propane accessories, because today we'll be reading out the story of King of the Hill, Lost Episode. We all know about the 1997 series King of the Hill. It is still airing on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block, but I encountered something dark with the series sometime in late 2007. I was at a Goodwill store to buy some N64 games, because that store normally had a good stockpile of video games. However, I strolled over to the VHS section in the back, just then remembering that I owned a VCR. One of the first things I saw was the Titanic VHS tapes, the one that came in 2 tapes, but it was in one dust cover. I thought it would be a good movie for me and the wife, as they had never seen it before. Just so the tapes would be functional, I took one of the tapes out of the dual VHS dust cover, only to see something unexpected. It was a VHS tape with a crooked sticker on it. Written in Sharpie was King of the Hill, Season 1, Episode 1, Never Air. I expected the other tape, and it said King of the Hill, Season 1, Episode 1, Never Air, Part 2. I assume it was Part 2. I do not know why one 22 to 23 minute episode took 2 VHS tapes, or even why they were being sold in a Titanic cover. But I was curious. I bought the 2 tapes for about $22. When I got home, no one was there but me. Therefore, I had to take up the painstaking process of uncurling the stiff coax cables in the bulky VCR. I soon tuned the TV to channel 3 and began viewing King of the Hill, Season 1, Episode 1, Never Air. It had the regular opening of the first episode of King of the Hill, but without the music. It was just a silent camera panning over the city of Arlen. It began normally after that, with Bobby at the baseball game and Hank yelling at him. As we all know, Bobby did not succeed. This is where everything's starting to get weird. On the ride home, Hank, Peggy, and Bobby were completely silent. And this went on for about 3 minutes. No one was angry. No one had any expression actually. Just completely blank faces, with only silence for company. Abruptly, as the family pulls into the driveway, it cuts to a scene inside the house. Hank was yelling at Bobby for not giving the 110%. Hank then picked up the baseball bat, got to a throwing stance. At this point, the video quality was getting very scraggly, and the volume was raised roughly about 10%. Hank pegged the ball, and it hit Bobby's nose. Peggy was singing in the background crying, and Hank simply told her to shut the hell up. Bobby immediately cupped his nose and ran to the room, crying the whole way. As Bobby was in the bathroom taking his nose, a social worker came to the door. Peggy greeted him as Hank sat on the sofa, relaxing as if nothing happened. From this point on, the colors began to look more like the weird episode. The scene with Hank telling the social worker all played as it did in the weird episode. Suddenly, the scene from the officially aired episode cut to another scene, which was not from the weird episode. It was a scene with a more ragged video, yet the audio remained the same. This scene depicted Peggy sitting on the phone late at night, most likely contacting child services to tell them about how Hank purposely threw the baseball at Bobby. Hank suddenly walked through the doorway. He was in a bathroom and had no glasses. He grabbed the phone. Who the hell is this? This is the Department of Child Services, sir, was the response. Hank's face quickly grew red, and he slammed the phone back onto the wall. He grabbed Peggy by the neck. You're gonna get one of those twig boys over here and put me in prison and take my boy away? He howled. The scene cut to Hank taking Peggy by the back of the neck down the hallway to the backyard. Hank took a propane tank off the grill and shoved the valve into Peggy's mouth. The video then went silent for a minute, simply sewing the propane valve in Peggy's mouth. When the scene started moving again, Peggy's eyes slowly closed, and a voice was heard. Buck Strickland, forgive me for using propane for this. The only problem was that when Hank said this, Hank did not even sound like Mike Juggs, the creator of the show who also voiced Hank. It sounded like an older, deeper voice. The screen went black after this. As fast forward through the rest of the day to make sure there was no more contact of it. There was none. I just thought to myself, why so much wasted space? And at this point, I was really shaken up. I went to grab a cup of coffee. When I got back, I popped in the second tape. It was just a black screen. I fast forward to check for contact, and eventually came across some stuff that was really starting to freak me out. It was a funeral, but there were very few colors. There was only various shades of gray and black, and the colors of the people's faces. It just did not seem like a real King of the Hill episode. The funeral was for Peggy. Attending it was all of the Hill's neighbors, including some acquaintances such as Hank's father Conan and John Coyd Redcorn. Even Hank was there, claiming that Peggy had committed suicide. As Peggy's coffin was lowered into the hole, it faded into an overhead view of it being lowered. This part scared the absolute shit out of me. It was a somewhat highly realistic image of Peggy in the coffin. The reason why I say somewhat is because it looked real, but it still appeared drawn and not a real person. It was just a realistic cartoon. The scene then cut to Bobby, Hank, and Ladybird sitting on the porch. Bobby had a queasy face, and Hank had one hand on the propane tank that he used to commit the murder. Bobby turned to his father. Why did you do it, Dad? He asked in a humble voice. I don't know, son. I just don't know, Hank responded. He almost sounds like he was crying. He then stood up and walked inside, leaving Bobby and Ladybird, who was still on the porch. And once again to a very dark scene with nothing but black, gray, and the skin colors. It was a scene that literally made my stomach turn. It was Hank hanging from the ceiling with a note pinned on him. It just stayed focused on him swinging back and forth for 2 minutes or so. And then cut to the ending credits with the normal outro and theme music. I was actually kind of laughing on the inside at the fact that the show was playing the regular ending credits after all that stuff happened. I was really more confused and creeped out at it. I went on some forums but found nothing about this episode. However, I came across someone on Yahoo Answers who had a similar experience as me. They received a similar tape that was switched off in Johns Creek County in North Georgia, a place about 20 miles away from where I got mine. I managed to get an AIM with this person, but I got no answers. I was really curious at this point, so I drove about 40 miles and went down to Cartoon Network/Turner Broadcasting H2. I knew that Fox Broadcasting made the show, but I assumed Cartoon Network had every episode on record, as they aired them all. Beforehand, I did some research and figured out who was in charge of broadcasting King of the Hill. So I found receptionist in the studio and demanded to talk with him. Apparently, though, I needed a guest pass of some sort. I was completely pissed off at this point, so I drove back home and put on my old seller's uniform. I was a seller for Johns Creek County for about 3 years. I went back, and though it is unlawful, I used my badge to talk to them. When I got to his office, he was just sitting at his desk talking on his phone. I walked up to him, threw the tapes on his desk, and demanded answers. He dropped the phone immediately and grabbed the tapes. I followed him to another office to the other side of the building. There was a small safe in his office. He opened it up, put the tapes in, and locked it. He then told me to leave, angrily. I didn't want to act like a self anymore because I didn't want to get in trouble with the law, so I left. When I got home, I flipped on the TV because I got nothing else to do after what I experienced. Adult Swim was on, and I was relieved to see a real episode of King of the Hill. To this day, there are only 2 copies of this episode on 4 tapes that I can find anything about on the internet. One of them, I assume, is still locked up somewhere in Cartoon Network Studios. You may possibly come across more of them in the flip shops throughout the Southeast. But I warn you, once you watch that episode, you're never going to be the same again.